And it's a pleasure to have Rajesh here on Life Sciences Today. I'm your host, Danny Lieberman. It's a lovely hot day here in Tel Aviv in Israel. And Rajesh, where are you calling from?
Hi, Danny. Good to be here on the show. I'm in sunny New Jersey, although right now it's a little cloudy out there.
Whereabouts in New Jersey?
Central New Jersey, just a town just outside Princeton, New Jersey. Yeah.
Ah, very nice. Okay. I spent some time in South Jersey actually, so
Wonderful.
across the river from Philadelphia.
Great.
Uh, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Just for our readers, Rajesh is you're a
A s-
principal scientist,
Senior distinguished scientist, yes.
senior distinguished scientist at Certara. Certara may not be known to a lot of you guys, but Certara is like a powerhouse in everything regarding AI systems and modeling for life sciences. It's kind of pretty big company by now, right?
It is. It is. It's growing by the day. Yeah.
Amazing. So we're here to talk about you, your work, your journey, um, creating value, capturing value, and the three things that you want to do for your customers in the next year. So let's start off
Great.
with. I want to hear all about you, how you ended up doing this at Certara.
Absolutely. Again, it's my pleasure to be here. I have a very fascinating journey. I call myself as a fascinating journeyman. I tend to learn a lot of things. So my first degree was pharmacy, and in my pharmacy program, I was very interested in drug development. I mean, even in those days. So when I continued my journey, I ventured into a couple of translational labs in Vancouver, looking at placental transfer of drug substances, and also, how do you predict from animal data, human clinical efficacy for oncology drugs. So after that point, I started my industry career. I've been in the pharmaceutical industry for now about 30 years. I like the intersection between science, biology, pharmacology, and math. Not many companies back then focused on integrative sciences as it relates to modeling and simulation. And in the early 2000s, I was part of many teams looking at how do you create value through modeling and simulation. So I've been in the modeling and simulation area for quite a bit. In one of my prior employment, I started a department of quantitative clinical pharmacology. And one of the things I start as biology first. When you have a drug substance, how does the drug work? What is the biological processes that make it work? So I start from the perspective of pharmacology, and that makes it, rationalizing what happens in drug development much easier. I realized that I could, increase the scale of my impact in a specialty drug development consulting company, which was the reason I came to Certara some 6 years ago. At Certara, I lead the innovation centers. We have 6 such centers within the Certara Drug Development Solutions. And we try to be at the forefront and the cutting edge of science to help sponsors of drug development achieve their drug development goals. So that's how I ended up in Certara. I'm very fortunate to work here with a lot of very nice capabilities, but also, extremely smart people. That's my journey, Danny.
Well, amazing. Um, so, tell me, Certara is a big company. They have a large,
Yeah.
large product line. There are a lot of things. I looked at the website. I kind of understood what you're doing, but give it to me like it kind of like eye level what the company actually does.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, let me step back a little bit, because one of the core principles in drug development is we try to understand the therapeutic window. That's the critical step. in terms of understanding the first principles of pharmacology. And by that, I'm talking about how do you predict the dose dynamic range? What is the minimum effective dose? How high can you go in dose? That dose exploration forms the basis of many of our modeling tools. So we have a significant core expertise around software. And that software could be any number of brand name products like Phoenix. It could be SimSip. It could be many other platforms that we have. In fact, we are also launching Certara IQ, which is coming later in the year. So we have our center core principle around software, and the services are enriched with that software delivery. So I, for example, am in the services side of the consulting business. And my clients are mainly, companies that are developing drugs from a strategic consulting perspective. How do you develop an early clinical strategy? How do you develop a mid to late development strategy? What is your target product profile? How do we use modeling and simulation to better define the dose and what are some of the covariates that affect dose? But also, how do you stack up with competitors? We use many types of modeling. We use meta-analysis and aggregate modeling with comparator data to say, okay, you have drug A, how do you differentiate with the standard of care? Or maybe in other competitors who might be developing similar or maybe different kinds of drugs. So our core area is software, but we have services built around it. We go soup to nuts. We go from early discovery phase, all the way through payer and reimbursement strategy. So we have both the depth and the breadth of drug development services that we cover.
Yeah, I noticed. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to hear directly from you is because there was like a whole soup to nuts on the website, all the way from dosing to medical writing, and I said,
Yes,
"Wow,
absolutely.
company, they're doing a lot of things for pharma. I have to understand, exactly, maybe in a better, and maybe not exactly, but understand better what you do." So your particular interest is around dosing. In other words, to help pharma choose the right dose for a drug they've already decided to develop.
That's correct. So I use dose as an example, but it's more about the strategy. Let's say you have a new drug, drug X, and, the company says, okay, we are trying to take the drug into development. Now, you have your preclinical data. How do you predict what happens in the clinic? So you could use a number of tools. You can use, a simple allometry to guide you, okay, these are the data you see in animals. How do you predict what happens in humans? Or if you have some of the more complicated modalities, the field is seeing all these innovative modalities, it's like cell and gene therapy, for example. How do you use, can an empiric model or a parsimonious model help you achieve those predictions in humans? Or should we use multi-scale modeling that takes into account, gene expression data, the biology, the downstream pharmacology, or even, immune interactions as they become important for some of these new modalities. In that case, how do you use multi-scale modeling? Multi-scale modeling is just, a little bit more complicated mechanistic model, such as the quantitative systems pharmacology model that we have. We can use that to predict what happens in humans, not only from an efficacy point of view, but also from a safety point of view.
Well, that's impressive. So these are drugs actually that have already left the preclinical phase and they're going into like phase one or they're
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. So they could be any number of things. It could be a new drug that is in the discovery phase, where the sponsor is saying, okay, we have a hit, a lead optimization molecule. How do we build this into a development candidate? And then at that time, you will have some idea, some scope of the market value or proposition that they might be targeting. Let's say it's a GLP-1 agent, just for the hypothetical example.
That's fine.
And they say, and then they say, okay, we have so many out there. How do we compare with those other drugs? And is my drug going to be competitive? Because at the end of the day, you also want to differentiate within your company if you have multiple drugs, and vis-a-vis from the point of view of a development candidate. Or when you take into the clinic, as you search for funding from investors, you have to sort of give them an optimistic view. I said, okay, we have a drug, it has got X probability that it will be better than the ones out there. And if so, in what way? Is it less drug interactions, less, less safety issues, or you're differentiating on efficacy? So you have a range of probabilities that you can build in your model that can help you decide, okay, now I have a drug at this dose that can produce X effect, but it is affected by food, and therefore, can I reconfigure my product in the discovery phase to have a lesser food effect, for example? And would that be more meaningful? Because at the end of the day, if you're competing with other competitors out there that may or may not have a food effect, that part of it could be beneficial for the innovator company. So that's just one example of that. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's a great example. From a commercial perspective, you could have great efficacy, but because
That's right.
it's the drug interacts with the food that we ingest in the body, then it becomes, I don't know, maybe it gets absorbed or something, and then it doesn't
Exactly.
work very well.
Probably. I mean, it could either, food can have any number of effects. It could, increase exposure, it can decrease exposure. How the drug should be dosed relative to food? Do you have to give in a fasted state? Do you have to give a fed state? And then, when it goes into the real world, even if you have instructions, say X drug should be taken in the fasted state, in the real world, not many people will follow that guidance. They might take it with a cup of coffee or a breakfast, and that could affect the way the drug is efficacious. So then, we also have run simulations to understand, okay, when you have a variable diet, let's say a person is taking a variable diet on a day-to-day basis, how that exposure is going to change with regard to that non-compliance, and what is the kind of exposure you will see, and therefore, a variability in response.
That's really very significant. I suppose I never I never thought about it, but obviously, people like you are working on the pharmacokinetics,
Yes,
and that eventually it ends up on the label of the drug that says
correct.
be
Yep.
eaten with food with a normal dose twice a day before eating or after eating. Now, I never thought of that. Actually, someone actually figured out that it would be optimal application to have it after you have a full stomach.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So basically you're actually considering at a very early stage, I'll put it in my own words,
Yeah.
um, the probabilities of success for a drug before you before you get out of the clinic.
Yeah. The probability, it varies, Danny. I think what happens is, as you build your data set, I mean, drug development, as I view it, is based on a totality of evidence point of view. You're accruing evidence as you go along. You're learning around the ways. It's like the Lou Shiner philosophy of learn and confirm trials. Early trials or learning trials, you build knowledge about your drug, and then you do this confirmatory trials, and that's a loop, the learning confirming cycle of how the drug stacks relative to the accepted regulatory principles. So as you move from one phase to other, the probability of success increases because now you have accumulated biomarker data. That's an area that we actively support as well, which is sponsors come to us with a range of issues. So let's say someone coming in at the first in human trial. They might be only checking in, PK or, some biomarkers that we might say, okay, why not take this biomarker forward? Because if you're thinking about an accelerated approval down the pathway, the FDA has got, a surrogate endpoints. You can use surrogate endpoints for an accelerated approval. So these are some of the regulatory guidance that we can give sponsors. based on the evidence generation that sponsors undertake. So I think oftentimes when sponsors come in, they might not appreciate the importance of biomarkers. What kind of biomarkers to select, what kind of biomarkers to study. Do you have the right sampling schedule? It might look very simplistic, but it depends on how do you characterize the biomarker response, because treatment response is a very critical aspect. And if you have a predictable treatment response, by developing a model, what you can do is in the clinic, you can simulate. You can do probabilistic analysis and simulate what-if scenarios. Okay, what happens when you have a drug X on the background of drug Y? What is the chance of you might see an incremental efficacy? What is the standard of care efficacy looks like? Can you get a preferential labeling? You might have a disease-modifying effect, but simply your clinical trials are not designed in the way that you can pick an effect and characterize that effect. So those are some of the areas of strategic consulting piece that we wrap around our software offerings. Go hand in hand in giving the best advice possible to our clients.
So it seems to me that's really fascinating, because it seems to me that actually by making better strategic decisions regarding the biomarkers, regarding the patient populations you want to study in the clinical trials, you can actually increase the probability of success by
Yes.
creating better strategies even before the first patient goes into your phase 1. Is that correct?
That's correct. And that continues. It's sort of the modeling is an iterative process. You can start with the preclinical model, then it becomes, when you have the clinical data, you can build a wider model. Now we have different covariates like food, drug interaction, patient status, patient variables. You can design a clinical trial to enrich the biomarker aspects. And we have a lot of work that we do with nonprofit agencies where we qualify biomarkers based on an enrichment strategy. So now you can, if you design a clinical trial, you can say, okay, these are the patient factors that I need to ensure the drug response is above a given threshold. Now, how do you maximize that effect? You can do a biomarker enrichment trial. And that enrichment trial gives you an increased confidence that your drug is working in a certain effect, because sometimes the drug target that sponsors might develop might require that biomarker sensitivity, which is not often characterized in early development. So that's also one area where we come in and say, okay, we have reason to believe that your target could be, better assessed in an enriched population. And that can yield decision making that would accelerate drug development as well. So we can increase the velocity of drug development in such a way that you can reach patients faster than some of the traditional linear sequence to clinical trials.
Right, the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3.
That's right. Yeah.
So it sounds to me that your primary buyer are biotech and biopharma.
That's correct. I would say anyone who is interested in drug development is potentially our customer. We have more than, I would say, about 2,000, 2,500 clients that are principally in the pharmaceutical industry. We collaborate quite extensively with nonprofits. We collaborate with regulatory agencies. When we have, many of our scientists are, well known in the field, either pharmacometrics, clinical pharmacology, regulatory science. So we participate in policy making as well, affecting the way we think about these things. And obviously it depends on data. It depends on our confidence on the data, but also the methodology. I mean, I remember when I entered the industry many years ago, modeling and simulation was not baked in. We had to rationalize and use and some would say push the boundaries of science. But nowadays it's baked in. We have numerous regulatory guidelines that a key guidance for advisors, not only from a methodological standpoint, but also the application standpoint. And one area that I think has given it a lot of value is, reducing the burden of pediatric clinical trials by using, extrapolation. So you can extrapolate from adult data based on predictability of your treatment response, but also similarity of disease and similarity of response in two populations. And for that, much of the modeling and simulation that goes in the background achieves that and effect. Now, what happens with that is you can reduce the duration of these clinical trials in pediatrics. You can also leverage prior information from adults in a very favorable way. And this construct of model-based extrapolation is getting a lot of interest, not only for pediatrics, but also pediatric rare diseases where, we don't have a lot of patients. There's a lower incidence of patients and availability of patients in clinical trials. So we try to provide the sponsor with a range of options. You can pursue in this direction. This is a probability of success. At the end of the day, it's probabilistic science. What's the probability that you
Right.
might see X or Y or Z?
Do you go into causality at all? Do you actually look at, do you do, what would happen if this? Or do you the other way around? What would happen if not this? Counterfactuals. Do you do that kind of thing?
Yeah, so in the context of the modeling simulation process, if I understand your question correct, Danny, is, how do you validate the findings, right? So sometimes, we run, at the end of the day, the model is as good as the data. If you have the right data, then your precision around those estimates is under control and it's helpful. What happens also is sometimes is that when you have difficulty studying populations. So, for example, in rare diseases, when it's almost impossible to run a randomized clinical trial with a
Right.
placebo-controlled arm, then what is the alternate to that approach? Can you use external controls? The external controls can be from natural history data. It could be synthetic controls from a modeling and simulation virtual patient. Or it could be any number of things. But we do what is called a sensitivity analysis that says, okay, we check our assumptions, whether the model is generating the right amount of data.
Cool. I think, one of the things that you mentioned before, and I've been sort of like, it's been sort of like, brewing in the back of my mind since the beginning of the conversation, you mentioned learning.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think Certara is very much a company with a great deal of knowledge and in knowledge management, it seems to me.
Yes.
How much of this, learning or this methodology of learning and tools do you transfer to your customers, to the sponsors?
Absolutely. I think that's the core of what we do. So I don't know if you know, we have a Certara University.
Well,
We
I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
there is
See
a
that on the
Certara
website.
University. So and all of our scientists, the way we approach either amongst ourselves or with our customers or clients or to external audiences, we are scientists first. So we try to actually do the education piece, which is very core and centered to our heart. So even when we relay the findings of an analysis or a simulation output, we walk them through with our customers. And sometimes what they do is they ask us, hey, can you come and present to us this new tool that you have, so that our group can learn from it. And for us, learning is the centerpiece of knowledge management. I think that's the core thing. And I think, one of the things that's very interesting is, when I started the industry, the industry was mainly dealing with small molecules.
Right.
Right now, it's exactly the pendulum has swung in the opposite direction. It's mainly biologics and some of the complex modalities. And what happens is that many of the drug developers who are small molecule based have sort of progressed to do biological science. But what happens is that, how do you transfer? Some of the knowledge that you get on small molecules may not transfer to biologics. So how do you build on that expertise? Our motto is, we are in a niche part of the business where we are spending time understanding what's next. What is the future holding for us? What is the next 5 years going to look like? What is the next 10 years going to look like? So we spend a lot of time thinking about this. It's like, how do we, create value? When you talked about value previously, how do you build value? You have a new modality, and we cannot think like a small molecule scientist when we think about cell and gene therapy, or we cannot think like someone with biologics background when you're developing an antibody drug conjugate, because at the end of the day, the conjugate is a small molecule payload at the end of it. So you will have to transfer the knowledge that you gain from small molecules to biologics, and then on to the bigger ones, the more recent ones. The cell and gene therapy is a very good example of something that is coming up in full swing. You need a certain, knowledge, expertise to build those things. And so that's part of the reason why, we spend a lot of time thinking about how do we convey that expertise. We learn something, we share it with people. We have a number of webinars throughout the year. We have a lot of content management specialists. We write blogs. I used to write blogs quite a bit. I have my own page on the website if you like to see. And it's just, how do we teach? How do we engage with the group? And how do we, create excitement about the younger generation, the newer generations of scientists who are coming along? How do we build that expertise is very critical, because we also need to hire, as we continue to grow as a company, we also want to hire the best scientists out there.
So there is this process of continuous learning, and
Absolutely.
it sounds to me like, if I was a customer of yours, if I don't know, I'm developing some biological for treating arthritis, say, then for sure that I would want to have my team learn as much as possible and inculcate that inside of
Yes.
my own company's culture also.
Absolutely. And it is interesting that you mentioned it, because I used to help a client whose first priority was, the role of my job was not much as a consultant, but actually to bring up to speed their a little bit more inexperienced staff. That was my goal. I was essentially helping them succeed. And hey, said, okay, these are the situations you're going to run into. And sometimes these are business situations, sometimes these are scientific situations, sometimes, pure coaching situations.
Yeah.
So we tend to get involved in many different ways. I mean, we're sort of like, let's help them out. I mean, that's their first priority, is helping our customers.
Yeah, I mean, that totally resonates with me. I had, for several years, I had a cybersecurity for a medical device consulting business,
Mhm.
and we did a lot of projects. And I think one of the things that I think differentiated us from our competitors, which were selling ours, right, were that the first thing we would tell a customer was, "We're not going to sell you fish. We'll show you how to fish." And by the time you finish the first project with us, you'll know how to fish, right?
That's
Which
right.
in cyber for medical devices, be able to do threat analysis and model a complex system. So some of these devices are quite complex, but so it's not a biological, but it is many connected medical devices today are quite complex systems of connectivity and software.
Yeah.
So being able to model that and then
Yeah.
give the methodology and the software tools to threat model their systems was a very powerful selling point for our clients, because they wait a minute,
Yeah.
whether or not they use this or not, but they had the feeling of, what's the word, of empowerment. They said, wow, that's great.
Right.
We're not gonna have to deal with Danny all the time. We'll be able to do it ourselves. And we had a big customer, a NASDAQ traded company,
Right.
who said, we work with them every year, and each time for a new product cycle. And after 3 years, the CTO comes over to me and says, I think we figured it out. I think my team understands how this works. Is
Yeah.
it okay if we don't call you next year? And I said, Bravo.
Yeah, exactly.
Bravo for you. You know, I'm happy for you. I don't want you to
Yeah.
call me at all. I mean, I'm happy for you to call me and ask me how I'm doing. But yeah, I mean, so that you know, that's a great way. You know, I have to ask because there's been this discussion, you know, about the role of CROs, and it seems to me you're dealing directly with the life science the sponsors, right?
Yeah, so we our primary customers are pharmaceutical sponsors, pharmaceutical industry, biotech companies, startup companies, and we don't have the CRO footprint, but we also work with the CRO. So for a good example is, let's say we have colleagues in early development who work in drug metabolism and PK, for example. They would advise on, okay, here are the regulatory expectations for drug interactions. These are the studies that you have to do. So we don't have a lab. But what we do is they would work with the appropriate CROs to help the clients maneuver through what are the expectations from a regulatory standpoint. So we interact with the CROs in that order, but we don't have lab facilities within our company footprint.
Right. So it seems to me that your your sweet point is working and teaching and
Yeah,
providing services to the actual sponsor.
that's correct. That's correct.
And within that, again, I can't say it enough, it's very much a learning process. So
Absolutely.
I understand how you create value. It seems to me you're creating tremendous value. And you know, this kind of learning has tremendous value to the core intellectual property of a company because now they understand how to go commercially to market and you know get it to work, right? And make
Yeah,
money
yeah,
from it instead of you know
yeah.
people you know eating a huge breakfast and it will never work, right? Something as stupid as so. So how do you capture value? How do you charge customers?
Yeah, so I think there are a number of aspects to that, Danny. In a software situation, it could be software licensing fees that clients could have. From a consulting perspective, let's say people are coming in for a unique expertise. You know, cell and gene therapy falls in the unique perspective. So that could be premium pricing related to that. It depends on our capacity, and we have a number of ex-regulatory colleagues on staff. So there is a niche offering. When you have a niche offering, you would have a premium pricing associated with that offering. If it is a modeling and simulation approach, let's say if some client wants us to build a competitor library of models that can differentiate with the competitor or a standard of care, then we would build a model-based meta-analysis type of offering for them, and that comes as a fixed fee pricing. If it is a strategic consulting, whether in early development, clinical development, clinical pharmacology, regulatory affairs, it could be an hourly contracting, or which could be either in a form of a retainer, or just a straightforward hourly contract based on the number of hours that we spend advising clients, and clients may come with different requests. Some of the clients could come in and say, hey, we are going to a regulatory agency. These are the questions. This is a background. Can you be our advisory board, right? So
Right.
we are reviewing the document as scientific experts, and we would say, hey, why don't you think, what about the questions of X, Y, and Z? How do you want to put forward these comments? And you might not be showcasing some of the work that you have done here, and these are some of the feedback that we would provide. It could be a partnership model. We could be sitting as a key member of a product development team that is embedded within the company, within the drug development company client. It could be, fit for purpose. Let's say Client comes in, we have a protocol, for a phase 3 study. We want analysis done for a certain endpoint. Though that could take the shape of a time-specified fixed fee consulting type of relationship. So these are some of the ways by which we capture the value from the services that we provide.
It just occurred to me, do you write protocols?
I do. We do. We have a medical writing group. We have a regulatory operations group. They're all AI augmented services. We try to embed AI ever since the AI group within Certara became embedded quite well. In fact, we recently announced Chris Button as the Chief Technology Officer. He has an AI background. He was a founder of Vyasa. And we have all those capabilities embedded in our services. So yes, we do write protocols. Sometimes clients might have a soup to nuts arrangement with a CRO that also produces a protocol as part of that process. We are fine with it. We can help either way. Our input comes in the form of design inputs, how long to collect a sample, what doses to study in the protocol, what type of inclusion criteria best set up, the study for success. And once you have the data from that study, we can update the model and say, hey, these were our predictions, and this is where your observations land. And that's confidence building exercise, not only for them, but also the regulatory agencies they interact with.
That's really interesting. But let me stop for a second and kind of digest what you just said. So you said that basically you start from some preclinical and you go all the way. You can write the protocol and revert the protocol if someone else wrote it. But
Yep.
you just said something that was kind of, caught my attention, which you said that we can take the data
Right.
and we can validate or verify actually
Yes.
that what we said was correct.
Correct. Yes.
How does that work?
So that's so when you have, let's say you have a preclinical model, you're developing a small molecule. That's the easiest form of a modality that you can get, and you use translational modeling, either empiric models or allometric based model, or even mechanistic based model. Whatever model choice you might have, you might say, I predict that the human effective dose would be 50 milligrams, just for the sake of argument.
Okay.
Then what happens is when we go and we run the study, or the sponsors run the study, they collect the data, the PK data, biomarker data, all this data. Then what happens is we build out a clinical PK model that is based on the clinical data. And then we say, okay, we predicted a dose of 50 milligrams as a dose at which some receptor occupancy can be observed. Let's say we are targeting 80% receptor occupancy. And for reaching 80% receptor occupancy, we need a concentration of, let's say, 5 nanogram per mil. So when we reach that concentration, we can say, okay, this was our predicted number, and this is a range of exposures that we have seen in the clinic. Now we can match based on scaled exposures. This is the clinically effective dose range. And that could validate the model that was developed in the preclinical species.
Yeah, and so that's data you get from what? From phase 1, phase 2?
Phase one. Phase 1. Whatever clinical trial that is going on, we can do that. And we can add it as you go, start with phase 1, you add phase 2, you can ask phase 3. So that at the end of the exercise, let's say once your program is completed, then you would have one integrated population PK model, and you would also have exposure response and exposure safety analysis, which is now a required component of all drugs filed in the US and in many parts of the Western world. And there are regulatory guidances that assist the sponsor in facilitating those analyses to be completed.
That's cool. So if I'm going back to my own example, which is I'm developing a biologic for treating arthritis, and I went to you and you helped us write the protocol. With the protocol, we did phase 1, phase 2 in the meantime. We have some, we have a readout from the phase 2. And we go back to you guys and we say, okay, well, what does it look like to you? Okay.
Yes.
Look
Yeah.
like the dosing, we thought it would be 50 milligrams twice a day after a meal, or just look like
Yeah.
it's be, I don't know. What do you say? Maybe it's going to be 10 before meals or something like that.
Yeah.
You can say that, right? That's what you can.
Yes, yes, absolutely. We are making those decisions or recommendations. I think the decisions are taken by the sponsors, but we provide them a risk assessment. I said, okay, under these conditions, your dose might be 50 milligrams twice a day. Under these conditions, and it could be either food or a drug interaction or maybe a slightly trending safety problem. We can say, okay, if you want to stay within a certain limit, then this is a dose range to pursue. So we give them a range of options, and which they need to also rationalize as they put together their common technical document at the end of the trial process for registration. So that's something that the agencies will look for. Is the justification of the model? Is the model done correctly? Are the assumptions correct? Are the conditions correct? Did the sponsors make the right decisions on dose? And those are some of the things that would be assessed from a regulatory success point of view.
That's impressive. And so I assume I'm going to take this all the way out. So now post-marketing, you get some real world data from me. I said, we've been selling this for a year or two now, and we have some real world data from I don't know, whoever collects real world data, arthritis, I have no idea. And then and then we said, well, let's get some real world data to see what it looks like. Is it
Yeah.
working? Is it not working? Uh,
Yes. Yes.
so you do that actually.
Yes, we do that. I mean, so it's client based. So programs for which we support all the way through, clients do come back and say, hey, we have got approval in one indication and we are thinking of another indication. Can you bridge the data from the previous indication, or do we need to restart our development program? So these are some of the questions that people come in with questions, and we provide them with the best possible answer. Sometimes you would need to run a trial. But some of the regulatory health authorities are very flexible, not in terms of flexible from a regulatory requirement point of view, but flexible in terms of weight of evidence point of view. So there's, Danny, one of the things that I see, and I would like to see as well as a scientist, is moving away from the trial-based decision making to data-based decision making, right? That's the
Well, I've
critical
been writing
part.
about that the past 2 weeks on LinkedIn, all about that. I'm a big fan
Yes,
of
yes,
that.
yes,
I
yeah,
really believe in that because I'm a physicist by training. I've never
right,
understood, trial, face, and then, and then
yeah,
stop. Maybe, you know, we're looking at a trial, like another project I'm involved in, and it's, oh my God, it's like impossible to understand what's going on there. We're just spending several days just trying to understand what they did, right? So,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
right.
So that's what I would like to see. I do see people getting there. I think many people believe in that concept. I think pharmacometrics and as we call it, beyond pharmacometrics is helping people think about the data a little bit more holistically, right? You're looking at the data, and the data doesn't have to be within your drug development program. It could be outside. It could be a natural history study. It could be real world evidence for which data exists publicly. You can use all of those different data, and they become part of like an ecosystem of modeling and simulation. It could be, and it could be, using external controls. It could be the way you design the clinical trial. It's the data centricity mindset that has to change because, in rare diseases particularly, we will not be able to expose these patients, and some of them are children, under 5 years of age, to placebo treatments. So we'll have to come up with some unique ways to assess, the information without compromising scientific rigor. I think scientific rigor should be first and paramount, but we also should think about ways of alternate thinking, alternate ways of thinking where, yeah, if there is, a natural history of disease data that is available there, or maybe we should initiate one. Or, can you bring forward open source innovation? Can there be a consortia? Can we share data across different organizations? From a pharmaceutical industry perspective, that is. And that way we understand what is the progression of disease over time. And, do we really have a disease modifying treatment? Or we are just symptom based therapeutics. So these are
Yeah.
some of the broader questions the industries should deal with. I think in the years to come, I think I'm optimistic that we will get to see some remarkable achievements of transformative change.
Yeah, so that sort of brings me naturally to my last question, which is kind of like an interview question. They would ask you, so, Rajesh, where do you want to be 5 years from now, right? So I'm gonna ask you, so three things, one, two, three things, right?
Yeah.
That you want to do for your customers in the next 12 to 18 months.
Great. No, that's a great question. I think the first and foremost is how do you change the trajectory of drug development? I think if we can move from a traditional mindset to a more innovative mindset, bringing forward, innovations in clinical trial design. So those, some of the things that I'm thinking about is how do you use model-based augmented clinical trial designs? That would be a nice offering to offer our clients, with the second area that I'm very interested in is the industry has been focused, unwaveringly focused on efficacy. We tend not to pay a lot of attention to the distant cousin called safety. So how do you bring forward positive change? Because the norm in the industry has been you predict efficacy, you characterize safety. I think that reactive mindset should probably change so that we also be predictive safety as well. So I think as sponsors, one of the things I would like to offer clients in the future is how do you change the thinking towards predicting safety in addition to predicting efficacy? I think efficacy, we are there. Safety, I think, the field has to change. The third aspect is we have to build the talent for the next generation. We have to really, engage with our clients, with our partners, with our collaborators, and bring forward, a sort of like an educational movement, if you will,
Yeah.
so that not only we create the scientists of the future, but also how do we, give them the tools? How do we, enable them, both both the learning wisdom, but also the experience? How do we continuously, educate ourselves, but also bring the field up to a certain, upper threshold, so that we all can have a win-win scenario.
That's a tremendous thing to say. There is a professor at the Technion Medical School in Haifa. I forget his
Uh-huh.
name, but a son of a friend is in the program. And he's doing this like crazy, okay? But he's like doing a triple program.
Hmm.
So you have an MD, PhD.
That's right. Yes, yes.
So he's doing a triple program. So he's doing MD, PhD, PhD in computer science.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
That's amazing. I mean, it's like a crazy program.
Yeah.
Okay. But my friend, I asked him a while back what's going. He said they're having a ball. They're working their butts off. They're working really hard, but they're having a great time because this professor believes that the MD of the future will be a computer scientist. And
Yeah, I think it's possible. I mean, we already have Chat GPT running our, day-to-day variations of life. So there's a little
yeah,
bit of a, a
so
little bit of a computational spin to that already. I mean,
yeah, it's happening, right? So maybe AI is helping this professor make his dream come true faster than he actually imagined. So yeah, so that's probably the MD of the future is
right.
this whole notion of taking the industry from trial transactions to data decisions.
Yes,
It's
yes.
huge. It's huge.
Yeah. Yeah.
the whole world works on data-driven decision making.
Yeah.
I think, to my taste, maybe a bit too much, but let's think about people here a bit also.
Yeah.
But still, I think what you said about moving from the trial model to a data model to move from reactive approach to safety to predictive safety and thinking about education for the talent of the future. I think these are very, very, very important goals. It's
Great.
been a pleasure, Rajesh, having you on Life Sciences today. My name is Danny Lieberman. I'm here with Rajesh from Certara. We're talking about some amazing things. You can find us on your favorite podcast channel on Spotify and YouTube and Google and Apple. We'll go live in a little bit. It'll probably take 3 or 4 weeks because we have a backlog. But when it does go live, we'll let you know. We'll let our readers know, our listeners know when we go live. This has been an amazing show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Danny. It was a pleasure to be on a show.